So, garage door seal replacement. I've never had to do one of these before. Mine has obviously been torn up, and actually noticed I had a rat in the garage. You can see it's actually chewed through it. So I'm getting to look at this. I thought it was going to be pretty easy. I bought a new seal. Here it is laying on the ground. Amazon. Pretty easy to get. But I got to looking at this, and I'm pretty certain that the seal was installed at the factory with the door not in here, which would make sense. And I think what I'm going to try and do, I think I can use the same channel. It came with new channel in the kit, but the dimension looks about the same. I think it'll work fine. It appears to be riveted in. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about this, though. I may have to take this lower roller assembly off to get to it or cut it. So I'm not too sure what's entailed here, but I think I can probably sneak it in from the side. The whole thing seems to move pretty easily, so hopefully the new one, it'll be a little bit softer, probably won't slide as easily, but maybe I can sneak it in from one end or the other. So let's take a look at this. Here's what I've done so far. I got to looking at this. This is one of the garage door. I think most of them are set up this way. It has the cable. This is a standard setup. I know that for sure, but it's got another pulley that's on the back side over here, right there, and that comes around the back and it comes to the lower roller. So that's what pulls the door up and down from the tension, the torsion springs that are on here. Right, so there it is, and that's what pulls the door up and down on this side. So I pushed the door up as far as it would go, where there wasn't a whole lot of spring pressure left, and I was able to lift the cable off that sheave back there, the pulley. Can't really see it from that angle, but so after I did that, I held on to the door and I just backed out the bolts that are here, and to get that out of the way of this channel. And then to keep the door held up in the meantime, there's another hole in the door back here, so I just moved the bolt back one, just kind of put it in part way. That way the door doesn't fall. It's still held, but now I've got clearance to slide this thing out of here. So this should, if I get a good pull on it, I should be able to pull this all the way out of here. So let's go ahead and we'll get this thing out of here, and then we'll see if we can't get the new one in there. All right, so there it is. I pulled it out. It took about 30 seconds to pull it out of there. I was lucky it wasn't really stuck in there too hard. It is a little bit dirty, so I'm just gonna take my brush here and I'm gonna go through and clean this whole thing out. I want to make sure it's clean, that the channels are clean. I might even get my air compressor out and blow this out a little bit. The other thing I noticed, this channel is actually wider than the new channel that came with the new unit, with the new rubber threshold. Here it is. This is the new one right here, and this one's a little bit different. It actually has this piece inside of it here. If I take a look at the end, you can see it. It's got this in it. It's supposed to keep more pressure. Compared to the old one, is just a regular piece of rubber, just like that. You can see here's where the rat chewed it, right here. I didn't even notice this at first, and then I thought it got torn, but then I realized after looking at it, it had been chewed on by a rodent. So don't want rats in the garage. So this thing's pretty wasted. This garage door dates back to about 98, so it was due for replacement. But they both work the same way, where it's got this channel on it that these two pieces basically slide in. Now this aluminum channel it came with is sectioned because that's how they ship it. So instead of it being one 16-foot long piece like the rubber is. To ship it, they ship you these little sections that look like they're about 30 inches long or so. But I noticed that this dimension right here is a little bit narrower, which means if I use this, it's going to squish it together more. It's going to be a little bit taller. I don't really want to replace that channel though over here. I think I'd prefer to not replace that. I think it'll probably still work all right, but if it doesn't, if it's too flat, I might have to bust out the rivets. And I know it's interesting, I don't see any other rivets. It's almost like this is molded in here somehow into the door. Really not sure how they do that. I see a rivet on the end, so I don't know what that's all about. I'm not sure, but I don't know that I want to play with that or not. So we'll give it a shot and see if we can't get the new one in there and how that's going to end up looking. Just get it brushed out and cleaned up here, and then I'll feed it in there. All right, so it's part way in now. I've got it about 4 feet in or so. Not too difficult. It slid in there pretty easily. Like I thought, the softer rubber is a little bit more finicky. It doesn't want to slide. So what I'm doing, and I'll try and do this one-handed, but I'll show you what I'm doing here. You take it and fold it. So as I'm feeding it in, sorry, it's a little difficult one-handed here. I'm folding it to keep it kind of parallel so it doesn't, so it doesn't get bound up. Because the worst thing that could happen when you're trying to do this is you pull it in and it gets bound up, and then you got to pull it out. You could tear it, So I want to be careful about doing that. But I'm just taking it, I'm squeezing from this end. My other hand, I'm pulling it on this end, so it's push-pull kind of a deal. And it seems to be sliding in. So let me see if I can't get it all the way in there. All right, so it is in. It wasn't extremely difficult, but it is not a one-person job. So I had to go grab my wife and have her give me a hand. And the thing that I said not to do earlier, I just assumed she knew to do, and I guess that's why it's a good tip, because it started getting towards the end and I went over to pull it from the other end, and she didn't know to squeeze it from this end, and I pulled it, and of course it tore it a little bit. So make sure you tell your wife to squeeze it, because that's the lesson. So I'm gonna cut this off right here and put this bracket back on, and this thing will be ready to rock and roll. All right, so she's back together. Not the cleanest cut on the end. I used a hacksaw just because it's what I could get in there, but it cut it decent. So it's all new, and a little bit of a struggle getting the cable back on here. You can see how that works. It goes up over that shiv up onto the spool, and so it's a little bit difficult to kind of get that back in place, but not too bad. One-person job, so for that piece. So there it is, brand new seal. All right, so one last thing I forgot to mention on this. It did include these little rubber pieces, and what these are for on this particular type of threshold that I got that has that internal loop of rubber to kind of keep it more rigid. They want these inserted in the end, so pretty easy to do. It keeps the end rigid and from being able to fold real easily, so you just insert that there. So there's one here, and do the same thing on the other side. Here, now that it's been replaced, and I thought that this might be an issue, although it's not really an issue, but if I wanted to be a perfectionist about it, you'll notice when it closes, get it closed here. So I could hear it strain just a little bit there at the end, and it's because it's compressing all that rubber. It's probably okay. I could probably adjust the close limit a little bit. I'm not sure if it's getting to the close limit or if it's going into current limit. It might be current limiting, but I think the door would go back up if it, if it thought that it was compressing something. But there's just a little bit of a gap there. It's not very big. I may adjust it to come down a little bit more, although it is touching up here. I'll probably leave it alone. But so that might be something that you run into when you replace this is, if your limit was real low and it compresses the rubber, it actually might cause your door to go back up because it thinks that there's an obstruction. I think I'm going to leave this one okay, but that's just a footnote in case you run into that, because you can see how much that compressed down. So that's how I replaced my garage door threshold rubber.